a lot of our textbooks. So you might remember her name, her name or not, his name or not, but he is going to tell us a lot about his work as an author, which is amazing because sometimes we do not have that possibility of listening how a book is created from the very beginning, which is great for us. So, for instance, he's the author of Metro Second Edition, in which is a title for Latin America. And James has presented at international conferences such as IATEFL. He loves traveling abroad as a speaker and as a teacher trainer, and he teaches every week in Calibre, UK. He loves cycling, live music, and travel. When he's not writing or teaching, of course, he's really riding his bike and spending time with his young family. So, without further ado, here is James with you. So, welcome, and I will give you in good hands. See you.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. I was a full-time teacher. I started in 1995, so I'll let you work out how long ago that was. It was a long time ago. And so I remember how difficult it is when you have classes to prepare, homework, you're perhaps teaching at 2 or 3 different centres. It can be incredibly busy and incredibly hectic. So thank you, everyone, for taking the time out of your busy afternoon, your busy schedule to listen to me. I appreciate it. And welcome to my talk. I'm going to be talking today about active learning for positive outcomes. Sol, are you able to make my picture go to the top of my screen for me, please? So today's talk is going to cover a little bit of the theory about active learning and what that means. And mainly, we're going to be talking about active learning in practice and how active learning can make your classrooms really come alive and be really exciting and dynamic and really work for you. But before I do, Sol's given a brief introduction. I thought it would be only fair to give you a little bit of information about myself. Who is this guy? Who is this guy? So my name is James Styring. I'm a writer mainly. I'm also a teacher part-time, and I do teacher training as well. And I was a teacher for 5 or 6 years in Spain. I taught English in Spain. I taught English at a university in Australia for a year. I was teaching Asian students there. I taught at a college in the UK. I taught Spanish and English. And then for 5 years or so, I worked in a publishing company, OUP, Oxford University Press, and I was an editor there. And then about 20 years ago, I started writing books, and I've written a number of books for Latin America. And those of you who have been in teaching for longer than Sol, who doesn't remember these books, I wrote these books many years ago. No, sorry, not those books. These books, Heads Up and Look Up, which some of you may recall from your secondary classrooms 12 years ago. That book came out. I wrote the first edition of Metro, which some of you may be familiar with. And for both of those courses, for Heads Up and for the Metro first edition, my co-author and I traveled to Brazil. We spent 2 weeks traveling around Brazil, different cities, meeting teachers, observing classes, and finding out what really makes people tick in your part of the world, what your needs are, what your students' interests are. And I think and hope we came up with a formula for a book that was really exciting. For me as a teacher, when I'm selecting materials, I always try to find a material that I am learning something from, or I look at the material, or it could be a text from a newspaper, and go, wow, that's really interesting, that's really cool. Because I feel that if material piques my interest and makes me interested and excited, then it might have the same effect on my students as well. So that's something that I'm always looking for when I'm selecting material. And that's what we wanted to put into Metro first edition and second edition. I've got a big pile of books here. Metro second edition, which is this this series here. So this isn't a commercial presentation, don't worry, but during the talk I will be illustrating what I'm talking about using examples from Metro 2nd edition. So I mentioned that I'm a teacher, and I am a teacher. I teach 1 day a week. At the moment, I run a program for Ukrainian refugees who are in the UK, obviously escaping the war in Ukraine. And we have about 15 teachers, so I sort of coordinate the teachers, and I teach as well, face-to-face. They are young adults, mainly women, actually, with very young children with them. So that's very interesting and very challenging and keeps me very busy. And prior to that, for about 10 years, I was teaching refugees again in Oxford at a voluntary program for helping people who needed help, basically. So that was a little sort of introduction to me and who I am and what I'm doing and what I'm talking about. How do I make the picture go to me? Is it that one? Oh no. Okay. I'll have to work out, so I'll have to toggle between the picture of me and the picture of everyone else. Can't work it out. Anyway, so today, yeah, we're talking about active learning for positive outcomes, and I just thought it would be interesting to find out from you guys what you understand by active learning. So active learning is kind of a phrase, a buzzword, you could say, in education at the moment. And I thought it would be, well, we wanted to make Metro 2nd edition full of the active learning principle. And so I just wondered if you guys had any idea what it might be. So on your screen, you can see 3 sentences. And one of those sentences is not what active learning is, in the sense that I'm going to be talking about it today. So if you could complete the poll, which Sol has put on the screen, that would be great. Thank you very much. So one of those sentences is not active learning in the sense that we talk about active learning in educational circles. How are the results coming in, Sol? I can't see any results coming in.
Yes, I will give you just a few more minutes for people
Okay.
to click because I can see numbers are moving and moving. So I will just give them
Okay.
some
So
minutes.
while you're there, I'm sorry, everybody. Can I just ask really quickly, how do I switch between the picture of me and the picture of the slides? Can you remember?
Yeah, let me check on that, please. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just can't see a button to do that. Anyway, never mind. I know it's possible. Okay, has everyone voted, Sol, do you think?
Yes, I think they have. And so let me just mention the results. So 11 of them had answered that B is the right question, the right answer, sorry, and 6 of them have chosen C. So everything is between B and C.
Okay. Has everyone got the right room, do you think? Has everyone voted that wants to vote?
I think most of them have voted, but I haven't. I can reopen this if you want.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine.
Okay.
The correct answer, well done, everyone. The correct answer is B. Students being physically active in the classroom isn't really what we're talking about. So active learning means students being actively engaged in the, there we are, show slide number 8. Actively engaged in the learning process. It means students sort of thinking about lessons before they start and what they might get out of lessons, activating schemata, you could say. It means thinking during the lesson about how it's working for them and what's difficult, what's what's helping them to remember things, what's enjoyable, what isn't, and why. And it's reflecting afterwards about how the experience was, how it went for them, what they might need to study again, what was difficult, what was easy for them, that kind of thing. So. A lot's been written over the years about active learning. This is a position paper written, sort of published by OUP. It's called Learner Agency, and it's all about active learning and putting students at the centre of the classroom, at the centre of the learning experience. Lots has been written by university professors, and talks have been given, and there's a lot of stuff there. It's really confusing, and there's a lot of information out there. And the good news for you guys is we've read all of that stuff so that you don't need to read it. And all of the principles and the ideas behind active learning are embedded in Metro. And I'm going to explain how that works in Metro, and possibly more importantly, how you can extend that and make sure that you're using active learning in your classroom as well. So the literature tells us that active learning means students being actively engaged in the learning process in the ways that I just described, thinking about their learning before they start, while they're doing it, and after they're finished. And the theory is that students should have opportunities to practice all of the language that they're learning at least 3 times, not just once. You don't just present something and then go, okay, you've done that, fine, we'll move on. Students should have lots of different opportunities to practice new language in a variety of different formats. So you might want to look at, video and getting students to act out sort of something that they're seeing in a video. You might have them playing grammar games or vocabulary games, all that sort of thing. And what's really key with active learning is giving students an opportunity to practice language in personalized ways. Okay, so I'm going to talk much more about that and how you can do that in your classrooms in a moment. I'm just going to show you a menu of, here we are, a menu of what we're going to be looking at today. I'll just let you read this. This is a list of the things I'm going to talk about. Okay, so these are all different ways in which active learning sort of features in our course books and can feature in your teaching. And before I go any further, it would be interesting to ask you what your teaching situation is, because until 2020, we were all teaching face to face, obviously. And now a lot of us are teaching online, maybe online only, or maybe a sort of hybrid situation where you're teaching online, or some students online and some students in the classroom. So if you could just let us know through this poll what your situation is, that would be helpful for me to think about as I go through the talk. Thank you.
I'll give you just one more second and then I will publish the results for you.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Sol. It's so funny when you can't see anyone and you can't hear anyone. You're like, oh, can they hear me still? So what's your teaching situation? Face to face, hybrid, a bit of both, or are you actually only teaching online? Roger, I'm glad you can hear me. You never know. Ah, okay, so cool. Thank you. Wow. Okay, so I'm surprised. I didn't expect so many of you to have classes that are only online. So I will make sure that what I'm talking about and it includes ideas for how to, uh, 23% includes ideas for how to teach people who are online. I think teaching in a hybrid situation must be difficult. I haven't tried that myself, and I have given it some thought. So I'm going to try to include mention of hybrid learning as well during my talk. Okay, if we can we get rid of that poll now? Okay, cool. So I also wanted to say, so I've been in English language teaching for a long time, and some of you may have been teaching for a long time as well. And I just wanted to point out before I start that a lot of what I'm going to say, probably most of what I'm going to say, isn't new, actually. It's not incredibly innovative, but it is stuff that I use all the time, that I find works in the classroom, that I find, keeps my students learning, thinking about what they're learning and enjoying their learning. And so I have what I think of as a mental active learning toolkit. So when I'm going to start a class, I have a range of activities that I often start a lesson with. You have to vary it. Students don't want the same thing every time. They have favorites, so you can come back to those. And I'll be sharing some of those ideas with you in a moment. And so I have what I suppose I have a written list. I also have I guess a mental sort of checklist of things that I can do when I walk into a classroom, perhaps halfway through when students are getting tired and they need to sort of wake up a little bit. I have activities that are good for the end of a class, for practicing and producing language in a personalized and meaningful way. So I'm going to be sharing basically my toolkit. And my idea for this talk is that you may have a toolkit also already, or perhaps you don't have a toolkit. If you don't have a toolkit, you can take what's in mine and add to it. And if you already have a toolkit, if it's the same as mine, I apologize, but I bet it isn't the same as mine. And so my idea is that you can add my ideas to your ideas and have an even bigger active learning toolkit. So active learning toolkit. Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, the first thing from my list was previewing and reviewing lessons. So this in the literature is called activating schemata, previewing. It's kind of getting students thinking about a topic before they start the lesson. So I've got a few suggestions of my own to share afterwards, but I just wanted to show what Metro does and what most good course books do these days. At the beginning of a page, sometimes of a unit, usually of a page, you'll find that a course book gives you a learning objective for that page. And this helps students, or sometimes teachers don't have enough time to prepare. I understand. And so perhaps a teacher hasn't had really enough time to prepare and they've just walked in and opened the book and gone, okay, that's what we're doing today. Great. That's probably not you. I'm sure that's not you. But it happens. And so for teachers and for students, it's useful to have some orientation on the page, which tells you what to expect from that lesson. I figure it's like a courtesy, really, for for teachers and for students. And with my students, we always talk about what we're going to learn, because I think, particularly because I'm teaching adults, they kind of want to know what they're doing. Where are we going? Where's this heading? All this fluffy TEFL games and fun and stuff. Come on, just tell me what we're doing, dude. So books are good at this. This is another example from Metro, second edition. This is an example of reviewing at the end of a lesson. So it's the same, really, but it's asking students to consider what they have got from a lesson, what was difficult, what was easy. It might help students and teachers think about what they need to revise, what they need to do again, what was difficult for them. And again, good course books do this. Metro does it. I'm sure lots of other course books do it as well. And the first part of my active toolkit for you is sharing a couple of games that I do with my students quite regularly, actually. And given that my students are young adults, you can be sure that your teenage students will find it even more fun than my adult students do. So I often start a lesson by telling them that in my bag I have something, which I do. I have something in my bag. Maybe you can hear it. And this object relates to the lesson. It relates to the subject that I'm talking about today. So I wonder if you guys would like to guess what's in my bag. I'll give you a moment to put a few ideas in the chat. I'll try and scroll down to see what you guys are guessing. What is in my active learning toolkit? Would anyone like to guess? In my bag, sorry. What's in my bag? Any ideas? A rabbit. Okay, that's a good idea. A marker. That's a good idea. So it's not a marker. I have some markers here, but it's not a marker. It's related to a toolkit. It may be a word that you don't know so well in English. Is it a pencil case? Good idea, Jorgelina. No, it isn't a pencil case. No. A puzzle? No, Rodrigo. No. It begins with the letter S. Any ideas? And the hint, I'll give you a hint. It might be in a toolkit. A marker? No, it's not a marker. I'll put you out of your misery. It's a screwdriver. A screwdriver. Okay, so when you are presenting, before you start teaching something, it's quite fun to get students to scissors, screwdriver, Luan, you're quite right. A saw, good idea. Screws, good idea. I think I'm getting a delay on the comments. Screwdriver. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have waited. I think there's a delay with this program that we're using, so I should have waited. So yeah, it was a screwdriver, and it's quite fun putting things in a bag. It could be food, it could be a bus ticket, it could be anything that's related to the topic of your lesson, and it's quite a fun way of getting students thinking in English, making suggestions in English, and thinking about what's coming up in the lesson. Okay, Sol, are you ready? We're going to play a game.
Yes, yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. Always ready.
Okay. There you are. Brilliant. So, Sol, I'd like you to cover your eyes.
Okay, let me
Cover
take
your
off
eyes.
my
And
glasses. I'll do that.
seriously don't look. Okay. So, no peeping. Yeah.
No,
No look.
promise, no peeping, no cheating.
Okay. So, can everyone see that word? Don't write it in the chat box because then Sol will see the word. I hope you can read that word. Okay. So, this is a word. So, if I was doing this in a class, you can look now, Sol. By the way, thank you.
Okay, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
you can open your eyes. Okay, no problem. So if I was doing this in the classroom, I wouldn't show the word. Obviously, I'm showing you guys because I'm sharing with you how I do this activity. So I would have the word in my head, and Sol wouldn't have to cover her eyes. So Sol has 20 questions to guess something related to the topic of the lesson, and all of the questions that she asks have to have an answer that is yes or no.
Okay,
For example, she could say, "Is it a man?" I could say no, for
okay.
example. Okay, it's not a person, by the way, so it's something related
It's
to
an
a
object.
topic. It's an
Well,
object. Yeah, I guess it's an
okay, it's
object.
an object.
It's an
Okay.
object. It's a
Uh,
noun. It's a noun. I'm helping
is
you
it
here. It's a noun.
okay?
Okay.
Okay, great. Is it something that I could have at home?
No, no,
Oh,
it isn't. You could
uh,
practice your question tags. No, it isn't.
yeah. Is it something that we teachers use at school?
No, it isn't. Good idea.
No. Okay. So it is an animated object because it is an object. You told me that it is not a person. It is an object. Okay. Is it
It's
a
an object.
square?
No, it isn't. I can tell you it's really big object.
Really big object.
Mm.
It's not square. Uh, sorry, I do not have it at home. It is not in school. Is it something that kids use?
Well, that's a good question. Kids like going there, and when they
Ah,
go there, I guess they use it.
but it is not. Is it a place? No.
It's a place. So it's a place.
Is it a
Yeah.
place?
Oh, I'm going to count that as four. It's a place. I think that's 5 questions now, actually.
Ah, yes, but I've got 20.
You've got 20. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so it is a place.
yeah.
Okay, it's a place. But you don't know my neighborhood, so you cannot tell me if do I have a lot of green spaces into this place?
Ah, I see what you mean. No, but you're
No.
getting warmer. You're getting warmer.
Okay. Do I have fun if I ever go to this place?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
I will have fun. Okay.
yeah.
Um, I will have fun. It is a place. How often? Oh no. How often? No. um, do you know if I have ever been into? Is it
I'd,
probably?
I'd
Is
be
it?
very surprised if you've never been to one of these places. Very
Uh
surprised.
huh. Uh huh. I am running out of of options, and
I'm
I
going
only
to tell
have
you. I'm going to tell you. You lose, by the way. You lose, dude.
It's the beach!
Beach.
Oh, yay!
Yeah. Okay.
I should
So,
have asked if there was any
yeah.
sand there, but
So,
I
as
was
you can,
thinking of the
sorry, Sol. Yeah. So,
park. I know.
if you do this with your class, yeah, I could have given her some clues. That was mean of me. Sorry, dude. If you do this with your class, it can be really good fun. Students can do it, in pairs, thinking of questions. They can do it individually. You could do this online. This is something that you could easily do in a hybrid teaching situation by having students write in a chat box or, I don't know, speak, put their hand up, depending on the program that you're using. And it's a fun way of warming students up at the beginning of a lesson. Okay, where's the thing? Oh, here we are. Another thing that I like doing is what we used to call hangman, but now because that's a bit violent and people in schools don't like that sort of thing, you can do Spider-Man, and instead of drawing the parts of the hangman shape, you can do a spider's web. And when the spider's web is complete, the spider gets you, for example. I haven't got time to explain this game or give an example now. I was going to do that, but I can see that time is moving along quickly. But good news for you guys is you can relax during this talk. You don't have to take notes or anything. I mean, you can, but you don't have to, because I've produced a handout. And on the handout, I have written all of the suggestions that I'm going to talk about today. And there's also a link for the Hangman game. So that wiki page explains how to play Hangman. You probably play it already, in which case, enough. But that's all on the handout. When students know that, so that was all, those were activities for when students don't know the topic of the lesson. When students know what we're going to be talking about, before you open the course book, it's very tempting just to say, okay, open the course book, look at the picture, whatever. Getting students, say the topic's geography, getting students to predict nouns or adjectives or verbs that they might come across. And then when they get into the lesson, discovering some more of those. You could talk to students about why we might be learning stuff. So, for example, if we're talking about places in town, it might be useful to know how to describe places in town and talk about places in town if you live in an area where tourists go, because a tourist might ask you in English, excuse me, where's the cafe? Or whatever, and you'd be able to tell them where that was, or tell them, where a good restaurant was, or whatever. And if you work later in your life in tourism, it would obviously be really useful to have that language as well. I quite often do a team relay in this, not with adults, with teenagers, with younger students, where you have two teams in a big classroom. It might be too chaotic, but you can do this digitally as well. You could sort of, you could have two breakout rooms, have two groups of students in two separate rooms, and they've got to add as many words related to the topic that they can think of in a minute or 2 minutes. As I'm sure you know, students respond really, really well to time limits. It gives them a sense of sort of fun and it being a competition and a game, and it keeps the lesson moving as well. So that's quite good fun. I often play just a minute with my classes. My classes are quite small. I have maybe 5 or 10 students, which I know is very small compared with your classes. where you have maybe 2 teams in a class of 30, you might have 6 teams, and they have to get together and quietly work together. And again, you give them a minute or 2 minutes to write as many words as they can think of that are related to, I don't know, places in town, or adjectives for describing people, or action verbs, or whatever the topic of the lesson is. And that's a really good fun way of getting them to work out what they already know. And it can be really rewarding and satisfying when students realize, wow, we know like 30 words already, and we haven't even started this lesson. So there are many reasons why this is a motivating and useful thing to do. After lessons, it's really easy to hear the bell, everyone jumps up and runs out. But if you can, try to keep an eye on the clock, because if you have a few minutes at the end of a lesson, it's really valuable for your students and for you, so you can see what your students have understood. If you can ask them what they've learned in the lesson. So, for example, you could say, what can we do now we've had this lesson? Can you write a few statements? I can talk about my family. I can write an email to a friend, or whatever. It's really useful also to ask students to, in a slightly more philosophical way, to reflect on what they've learned. So it could be a language point, for example, modal verbs for obligation, or talking about experiences using the present perfect. But it might be something much more interesting, actually, like life skills or values. And I had a quick look in Metro too, and was just sort of looking through, thinking what interested me and what I liked about it. And I saw this page, which relates to a video about Paris. Now, I live in Europe and I've been to Paris a few times, but if you haven't been to Paris, you probably don't know much about it. And it would be really interesting to learn that. And so the cool thing about that lesson would have been learning about Paris. There's another cool thing I found. It's full of cool things, this book, I have to say. It genuinely is full of interesting things. Until I wrote this book, didn't know what an oobleck was. I thought that was interesting. And so if you ask the students that question after this lesson, they might say, oh yeah, I can use indefinite pronouns to talk about people, places and things. This is which is a bit dry. Or they might say, it was so cool to learn about an oobleck. Now I know what an oobleck is. So it's interesting for students to think about what they've learned, what they've actually learned about the world through the lesson, as well as the language points. Summarizing, asking students to sort of briefly summarize what the lesson was. Again, very, very similar idea there. Time's ticking on. I must move more quickly. So we've talked about previewing and reviewing. Now we're going to talk about personalized responses to every lesson. And this is really key to active learning, because it really sort of puts the language and puts the practice into the hands of the students. So again, good books, this is from Metro, but lots of books do this, obviously, ask students to personalize their responses to the lesson. So here students have watched a video about how to appear confident. And there's a series of questions which are personalized, which sort of make the idea of the lesson about them. This is a video about happiness in Mexico. And again, it asks students to reflect about their own country. And if you live in Mexico, you might have to talk about your town or something. It gives students an opportunity to personalize the ideas that they've been working with. And Metro, I think we tried to put one of these on every single page in Metro. I think there may be a couple of pages where we missed them. Your turn. So giving students an opportunity at the end of every lesson to sort of use that language to talk about their own lives using the language that they've learned. And I think that's really, really important. And I think it makes the lesson meaningful, the language meaningful for students. And it's motivating. It gives students a reason for having done that. Other things you can do, and these are all mentioned on my handout, so you don't need to make notes unless you want to. Ranking vocabulary. So, for example, if you were talking about action verbs for experiences, you could make a list of all the ones you've done, all the ones you haven't, all the ones you'd like to try, parachuting or surfing or whatever. If you were talking about food, excuse me, you could rank them according from your favorite or the tastiest to the most disgusting. If you're talking about jobs, it could be the hardest job or the coolest job or the best paid job to the least interesting job, for example. Digital homework. Now, I'm aware that in many classes in Latin America, you're not allowed to have mobile phones in the classroom. And that's the same in this country as well. But in my teaching situation, students do have mobile phones, and it's really fun to get them, for example, to video a short speaking exercise, because when you watch yourself speaking, it's really weird. It's really interesting because your voice, does my voice sound like that? I don't sound like that. I didn't say that. So it's a really interesting way of sort of hearing yourself and seeing how you're getting on. And there are all sorts of things you can do with phones in classes and outside classes, looking at the weather, looking at maps, looking at reviews of places. I mean, the list is endless, clearly. And if you can't have your students use phones or devices in the class, ask them to do it for homework, because if they've got some geography homework and some history homework, and the English homework is make a short video with somebody who speaks English about why they like their job, they will probably do that homework first, because it would be fun to go to the local shop or ask their uncle or whoever they know who speaks English to answer a few questions. And students can submit that kind of homework to you via the platform that you use for setting homework, that sort of thing. So just because you can't use phones in your classroom, don't forget them. Don't forget devices, because particularly for teenagers, they're clearly something that they're thinking about and using and wanting to use all the time. So if you can find ways to integrate them into your homework, if not into your lesson, then that can be a really fun thing for you and students to do. True and false sentences. I often start a lesson, or you can finish a lesson with writing five sentences about yourself, about your life. Or things I can do, things I've done, things I like. 4 of them are true, one's false, in pairs. Students have to guess which is the false one. Can be a lot of fun. Doesn't require any preparation. All of these things really are things that you can just do. If you've got them in your toolkit on your list, you can do them whenever you want to, whenever there's time. I talked about surveys. You can do surveys clearly without having to film things. You can ask students to, find out who lives the nearest to the school, who lives the furthest, or I don't know, any number of things, possessions, clothes, habits, experiences, that kind of thing. Using the language that they've learned to ask questions and make notes, and sort of mediation, in a sense, reporting things that they've discovered back to other people, is a fun way of personalizing language that they've learned. One way in which active learning, let me put it this way. One way in which to sort of get students really engaged with lessons, and for lessons to become really meaningful, is filling them full of values and skills that are really useful, and filling lessons full of sort of language speaking and language writing and receptive skills that are really useful. Note taking and writing in all different sorts of ways, or having conversations about different things in different ways. And it would be really difficult to plan your whole course if you had to think about all of these things. So I haven't got any takeaways about this. I just want to reassure you that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals document is fascinating, but it's really big, and you guys are teachers and you're really busy, so you don't have time to go through the whole document thinking with every lesson how that works. But we've done that for you, so that's cool. That's good for you, I think. The Common European Framework of Reference for Languages is the underpinning, the foundation of many great courses and language courses as well. But you don't have time as a teacher to go through that and think, well, what's really relevant for my students? How can I do that with this lesson? But we've gone through that document and done that for you. And Metro and any good course book should be full of skills and values that we're teaching that are useful and interesting. Ways of speaking, writing, listening that are really relevant and useful. And really engaging students, making their learning active and sort of involving the language in different ways to make it more meaningful. Another thing that's really important with active learning is having an involved and collaborative response to lessons. And what I mean by this is project work at the end of a lesson, or the end of a block of lessons, at the end of a month perhaps, end of a unit of work. So I think often there's a temptation or desire to make sure our students are always speaking in English, and clearly with short personalized responses to lessons, they should be practicing the English they've just learned. But there's a lot of value in asking students to work in their own language to produce a brochure or an advertisement or an article that's got illustrations, for example. And the final product can be in English, and it can be using the language that they've learnt. But the process of doing it doesn't necessarily need to be done in English. The planning and the negotiation and that kind of thing, if your students have a relatively low level of English, that isn't something that they're capable of doing in English. And there's no need, I don't think. I think what's important is that this final product that they produce, this task that they do at the end of the lesson, of the block of lessons, is something that really gets them to use their language. These can be, you can sort of invent your own, and sometimes it works quite well to do that, and sometimes it's really nice to do to have projects that sort of are naturally tailored to where you are, the stage you're at in your lessons in Metro. And I think a lot of other course books are good at offering projects that are meaningful and useful. Working with video and images. So we've talked about those 4 things that are great. We're now talking about working with video and images. So the internet's full of video, of course, and TikTok and everything. And there's no shortage of video. Lots of it's rubbish, obviously. Some of it's useful. Metro, like a lot of good courses, offers, I think, stimulating and interesting videos about all sorts of things. At the beginning of the starter and level 1 in Metro, there are characters who we see develop, who have a storyline, who have who interact and use language that students are going to use themselves, kind of previewing the language in an interesting and fun way. In the later levels, we have vlogs. So we have authentic vloggers, actually real vloggers who talk about things in a slightly simpler way than they might do normally. And we wanted to have vloggers because that's sort of very much where students are at this age. They're watching vlogs and YouTube, and we figured that providing something in English that was the kind of thing that they would find interesting anyway would be a motivating way of getting them to study English. At the end of every unit in Metro, there's a watch page, which is a kind of documentary introduced by some of the characters from the book. So they are students are exposed to a different style of video and working with it in all sorts of interesting and motivating ways. Hey, now you guys will get to watch a video. So this is a vlog from, I think it's book 2 from this book, I think. And it's a guy called Steve. He's a real vlogger. And I'm sorry you have to go, Cassia. You haven't missed much, and you can watch you can look at the handout that we've got. So we're going to watch a video. We're going to watch it without sound, So could you just go back a moment, sorry, and put the questions back? Sorry. I wanted you to watch a video without sound, and I wanted you to answer 3 questions. So I just want to give you a moment to read those questions. I'll read them actually, just in case. Where is Steve and what is happening? How is Steve feeling? What do you think Steve said? Okay, so we're going to watch the video in silence. It's only about 12 seconds long. I just want you to think about those questions, and then in the chat, put a couple of answers, and we'll see how you get on. A minute later, we'll watch it with the sound, and you can see how you did. Okay, Sol, thank you.
Waterfall.
Okay, I don't know if you can hear me. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. We're now going to watch the video with sound, and you can check whether some of your guesses were right or not. Sol, if you could play it with sound this time.
Buddha. This is a huge wall of water in the forest. You can walk right under the waterfall. It's cold! I had such an amazing time visiting these places. I love to travel.
Hi. So I had to rush that a little bit because I'm running out of time. My point is that watching videos without sound is one of many things, many ways you can work with video that's really effective. So when you've got video in the class, you don't just have to play it and do what the instructions say. There are all sorts of things you can do. For example, playing the video without sound and having students predict what the person's feeling, cold, or the person's saying, or what they're going to do next. Pausing the video and having people describe what they can see there and then. Pausing the video and having students predict what's going to happen now. What would you do next in this situation? All sorts of different ways you can have fun with video. Depending on your students, you might be able to get them to act out a little bit of the video, paying attention to the body language and the acting and the expressions as well as the script. And then maybe they can personalize that by changing the words, but acting a similar situation again. You can play Find It. So you can say, what are those people drinking? What were they eating? What are they wearing? And then while you're watching, they have to sort of look out for things. So it doesn't have to be about listening. Video can be about looking as well, as long as you're getting some language practice out of it. Memory tests are fun. Watch it really carefully, because I'm going to ask you some questions, and then students watch really carefully, looking at everything, and then you ask them some questions about what was John doing, how many people were in the cafe, what color was the cake, and that kind of thing. It's a lot of fun, particularly with younger teenagers. Another way of getting students just to listen for things, because listening is really difficult in English, is to get them to hold up a word. Every time somebody says beach or cat or hello or whatever, they hold up a card, which is their card, their word. You might have 20 different cards for different words around the classroom that students can hold up and use to show that they're engaged and listening and can hear what's going on. Working with images is very similar to working with video, actually. They just don't move. They say that a picture says 1,000 words. I don't know if you have that expression in Portuguese or Spanish. A picture says 1,000 words. In a secondary school, of course, a picture might say 100 words if you're lucky. But that's fine. That's good. These are examples of the kinds of thing I do with images. So I don't just sort of, images aren't just there in the class to accompany a picture. You could ask who the people are, where are they, what's the season, what time is it, why are they there, what are they doing, what's going to happen next. A bit like the video, what would you do in this situation? Or maybe they look at the picture and then the picture goes away, nothing to look at. How many people were there, what were they doing, etc., etc. Very, very like the video. So there's all sorts of ways of sort of making it more playful, working with images. There's a particular website I'd like to recommend to you, which is called ELT Pics. They have a Flickr account, and the URL for this, I think, is on my worksheet. It should be the handout. This is a collection of wonderful, beautiful quality images in many cases, taken by teachers, uploaded by teachers, for use by teachers. They're free to use for teachers. So I recommend you have a look at this and think about how you could use this in your classrooms. This is this slide is from a particular set. So some of the sets are, you can see that there's a set called Colors, Communication, Containers, Dreams and Ambitions, Routines, etc. So there's lots of albums with different titles. I wonder if you could have a look at this slide and just guess what the album might be. Any suggestions? Sports, Bora Bora, holidays. Very good. Nice ideas. Okay, there are probably some more suggestions coming in, but I'm gonna tell you guys because I'm running out of time. I'm really sorry. This is a collection called Spot the Difference, and that's a really interesting and fun collection of photos that they have there. Spot the Difference. That's quite I just thought I wanted to share it with you, basically. This is the end of the talk. I've talked about all those things, and now we're going to talk about having fun. So this is me in my classroom a couple of years ago, having fun with my students. We were playing a game or something. I don't know what we were doing. Having fun, of course, having fun. How can we have fun in our classrooms? Well, of course, books provide stuff. These are examples of some sort of fun, fast finisher stuff that you can find in Metro. There are all sorts of other places that you can find fun stuff. One book I use a lot when I'm teaching is this. It's not an OUP book, I'm afraid. It's ETpedia, it's called. There's a link to the website for this book on my handout. It's written by a friend of mine, John Hughes, and it's 1,000 Ideas for English Language Teachers. It's an interesting book. It's worth getting your hands on that book. What do I do to have fun in my classrooms? Well, in the few minutes I have left, I can tell you what I do. Chinese whispers. This is fun. If you've got a large class, you can have 3 different sets of Chinese whispers happening at the same time. And what it is you do this. I was walking home when I saw a cat. For example, you whisper a sentence into your partner's ear, and they whisper it to the next person, to the next person, to the next person, to the next person. And it's hilarious, the answers you get back, because once the sentence has been passed around 20 or 30 people, it changes incredibly. Sometimes people change it deliberately, I suspect, naughty students. But generally, people try to repeat what they hear, and it's very funny. It's a fun way of practicing language. Maria Eugenia, the name of the book is on my handout, so you can see the name of the book there. Chain sentences is a really fun thing to do as well. I would do this in probably groups of maybe 8 students at a time. So if you've got a large class, you might have 5 or 6. The title of the book, everyone keeps asking, ETpedia is the title of the book. When somebody writes the beginning of a sentence, and you might write, for example, I went to London and I saw and the next person has to get the bit of paper, and they write, and I saw the Queen, and she was alive. And then they pass it to the next person, and the person reads, I went to London and I saw the Queen and she was alive and I had a cup of tea with her, etc. And so students each write their different stories, and the stories pass around. You can have 2 or 3 bits of paper going around, and it can be really fun practicing vocabulary, practicing grammar, using chain sentences. Kim's game is a memory game which you can play with a whiteboard, and you can do it with an online class, or you can do it with a real class. You put 8 words or 10 words or objects on the board or on your table, and students have to look at it for 30 seconds. Look, remember. And then you cover it, or you take the screen off and you take away one thing and you put the objects back, and they have to look and they have to say what's missing. Silly game, a fun game, quite a nice way of getting students thinking about language. Who am I, or what am I? So this is fun, and we haven't got time to play it now, but basically what you do is you have students standing in a circle and you write, for example, Donald Trump on a piece of paper, and you stick it to the person's head, a small piece of paper like this, that sort of size. You tape it to their head, with a little bit of tape. Elastic band would do, elastic band. And everybody in the group can see the name of the person that you're talking about, that you that's on the piece of paper, but the person can't. So they have to guess, a bit like 20 questions. They have to guess the name of the person or the thing that's on their head. How many uses for? I don't know. How many uses can you think of for this? Yeah. So you can burn it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to tell you some of these uses because we haven't got time for the chat. You could burn it, or you could use it as a stool, maybe to get a book that's difficult to reach. You could use it maybe on a bookshelf to keep your books so they don't fall over, etc., etc. It's quite fun to bring in silly things that are relevant perhaps to the lesson, that you can ask students to come up with ideas for. And finally, that's nothing. So this is a kind of vocabulary game where you might say you've been learning fruit and vegetables, or something like that. You might you have to go around adding a word each time. So you would say, I went to the supermarket and I bought a cucumber. And the second person says, I went to the supermarket and I bought a cucumber and a lettuce. And the third person has to say, I went to the supermarket and I bought a cucumber, a lettuce and an orange. And then the next person said, that's nothing. I went to the supermarket and I bought a cucumber, lettuce, an orange, and a banana. And the next person says, that's nothing. And it continues. And it's really good fun. It's a silly game, and it's a fun way of remembering vocab in a fun and motivating way. So thank you for your kind words. I have finished. Finally, 1 minute over. So I don't know if there were any questions, Sol. Thank you all for listening. I'm sorry if you had to rush back to your classes and I talked for a little too long then. I do apologise. There's a handout that you can read, and I hope it's been useful. And the things I've talked about are all on the handout. Thank you for your kind words. Does anybody have a question they would like to ask? I don't know if there are any. Oh, hi, Sol.
Hi there. Hi, everybody. So if you've got any question, now is the time. Don't miss